Now, most scholars believe that First Thessalonians, the letter, that it is the first letter from Paul, meaning that the verses that are included in this letter would be part of the earliest writings that we have for the way that Christian community was gathering and what they were thinking about. Today in front of us are some of the closing parts of that letter to First Thessalonians in chapter 5. And how does Paul choose to end his first letter to this fledgling new experiment in faith at Thessalonica? Well, the closing of the letter includes a series of really kind of easy to remember admonitions that in reality are very hard to follow. So much like we might say to our kids, hey, make good choices, or don't forget your lunch, or call me when you get there, always be respectful, listen closely, pick up after yourself, say please, say thank you, right? Paul spends the end of his letter to the Thessalonica community with words on actions. So let's take a look at our verse today. We're going to look at verse 15 from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Here's what it says. Make sure no one repays a wrong with a wrong, but always pursue the good for each other and everyone else. Listen to that again. Make sure no one repays a wrong with a wrong, but always pursue the good for each other and everyone else. I mean, really, Paul? Really? How hard is this? That reptile part of our brain that wants to cut someone off in traffic, or to withhold affection when we're hurt, to express anger in bombastic words and gestures. But instead, Paul is telling this brand new church community, be kind. And then figure out how to do that. Think about it. Think about it. Think about what they were facing. Some of them were being beaten and tortured for their faith. They were having to meet in secret. They were relying on the kindness of strangers to help their community and to get the resources that they need. And Paul says, don't repay a wrong with a wrong. Pursue the good. Wow. As the occurrence of these words in a letter to a formed Christian community, I would venture to say that Paul wants us to be in relationship with one another and not just the ones that make us feel good or that it's easy. I would also venture to say that Paul wants us to think about humanity and how a little bit of God is in each person. It's much easier to empathize and humanize a person if you have a relationship with them, right? If they're not the other over there that we don't agree with, that watches a certain news station or does this or does that or uses this word or doesn't have this education. In other words, for me, if I was writing this letter, Paul would be like, hey, make friends with those that you don't like very much. And so we could say, all right, so what does that mean for us? Well, maybe it's join a small group at church and get involved. Maybe it's being in community helps my own self be accountable for how I treat people. The thing is, when you're in relationship, those people show up for you, and good relationships will also remind you when you're falling short. We all have blind spots. So having a group that holds you accountable is invaluable. Paul knew this. And we need to remind ourselves of this, that relationships help us be bigger than our reptile brains. And so in this letter, Paul is asking them, and yes, us, to not pay someone back when that is the first thing that we want to do. Instead, he's like, okay, we're going to be accountable. We're in church. We're in the way of Jesus. We're doing this differently. How we act towards one another is going to be different than what the world says. And right now at this church, Florence Christian Church, we continue to be in sabbatical and transition. From different pastors like me and Tracy being among you, to the building looking and feeling different, to worship sounding different. And in the midst of these moments when we're called to be in sabbatical, replenishing ourselves, taking a moment to breathe and not react all the time, to be resting and renewing, we also need to be accountable for when we do spout off, when we aren't offering grace, when we aren't breathing in the Spirit of God, when we're demanding that things be our own way because of this or that. See, the challenge today, in these words from Paul, is to set aside that first moment of lashing out and instead be looking to the whole community of people that we care about, that we're in worship with, that we serve with, that are also doing the best that they can in the way of love in that moment. Pursue the good. Make that your prayer today. God, help me pursue the good. God, today I will pursue the good. Amen.